Good evening and welcome back to the Collision Hub World's Fair. Hey, we have just 2 more shows to go. We are going to be talking about some financial issues here momentarily, and then we're going to end the event with a welding prep show with Chris and Larry and myself. But I want to jump right into this. I want to bring in our special guest this evening. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm humbled and honored to get to speak with all of you guys and share some information about, what's going on in the industry as it relates to finances. So
awesome. Well, we certainly appreciate you joining us today. We certainly appreciate you joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to you and step aside, and I'll be back in a little bit.
Cool. Thanks, Jason. All right, guys. So I'm going to share a little PowerPoint here. And I thought what we could talk about is finances and how it relates to what's going on in the industry. And really just what I'm seeing with shops in the industry across the industry. So some of the things that we're going to talk about are probably some things that maybe keep you up at night as an owner. We're going to talk about consolidation, how often we're letting our business advisors operate in silos rather than together as one unit, tech shortages, certifications, and all this additional complexity in the industry is just creating a different dynamic for business owners to plan for. So one of the things, there we go. One of the things that I preach often in the C20 groups or with clients or shops is about having an integrated approach toward financial planning. And what I've seen a lot is, as I mentioned earlier about silos, that collision shops often have a CPA, they have an attorney, they might have a financial advisor or a banker. But when's the last time you had all 4 of those people meet in a room together? Granted, the month of April, not probably the easiest month to get your CPA, away from their office. But this summer, could you get some of these people that help advise your business together to help you plan and make decisions for the future of your business? Because your CPA is going to be operating with taxes in mind. Your attorney is going to be operating with the business in mind and agreements. Your financial advisor might be building things for you both in the business and personally. And your banker might be deploying lines of credit or things like that. Having all 4 of those people together helping you plan can help you achieve so much more if they all understand why certain things are put in place and for what purpose, particularly as it comes to what's deducted in the business, what shouldn't be deducted. Having clear communication lines between all those would be super helpful. And on the majority, I'm not seeing that happen. So that's maybe a takeaway from tonight is, if you have these people in place, how can you get them together and communicate more frequently? And if you don't have someone in either of those seats, how can you fill it? Beyond that, it's about thinking through your planning. For those that are collision shop owners, do you have a financial advisor that focuses on your personal planning? Or do you have one that focuses on the business with benefits and retirement plans and things like that? And is there a way to bring those 2 components of your life together and have an overarching plan? The other thing is around having an exit plan. Certainly in the last 2 years with COVID, consolidation has become rampant. I've seen more outreach, particularly in the last 12 months, around what's the value of my business? Should I sell? How should I sell? And to some degree, it's a fire sale where people are starting these conversations with private equity or other shop owners or whatever the case may be without having a plan going into it. So as of recent, I've seen a lot of shops that have either gone 50% of the way through the conversation or all the way through the conversation. And then as an afterthought, thought about, oh, shoot, what's the tax implication of this? Or what is the true value of the business? And is this enough for me to, transfer this wealth on the rest of my life? And then beyond that, estate planning. For a lot of people looking at selling their business, does it create any estate issues or things that maybe haven't been considered? Depending on what state you live in, there's both the federal and the local estate tax thresholds that shop owners need to be mindful of as they're selling and changing how their wealth's distributed within their family. So those are some big things that I'm seeing just across the board that I think could be addressed and certainly should have some attention. The next thing is, as it relates to financial planning, every shop is different. Certainly there are some shops that embrace having more than one location, others that are more than happy having one location. But as the industry continues to get more complex and it becomes more difficult to find qualified technicians in the field, how we go to market is going to have to change. And in some cases, if you've got consolidators or a lot of shops in your market and you have a lot of competitors, you might need to approach your plan a little bit differently than you would if you're in a more rural market with less competitors. So if you find that you're in a city with a lot of other shops, if all the shops around you are offering benefits and offering all these incentives to have and attract technicians, you're going to have to change it. So realize that planning as it relates to the finances, as it relates to the future of the business, is going to have to be customized to your individualized life goals and business model. As far as it relates to planning for the success of the business, to my earlier point about consolidation, I've seen it's almost been like a fire sale the last 2 years with collision shops rushing to this gate of selling their business. And certainly there's been some people to capitalize on that. I've seen more people pop up with business valuations, services, and tools, and some of the pricing is pretty high. Often you can get valuations done by your CPA, your attorney, or your financial advisor. So those are some tools just to kind of look for. But regardless, though, it is important having a value of your business. If exit is on your mind and you're thinking about maybe I want to sell my business this year or in 5 years or 10 years, the first place to start would be to have a valuation done and figure out what is the price of your business. And that's subject to so many different variables. Just like real estate, there can be moments where the value of your business is higher and moments of your business where it's worth less. So it's important to understand that your business is really only worth what someone's willing to pay for it, and that can fluctuate year to year. Also, with planning as it relates to finance, a business owner's finance is integrated both on their personal side and within the business. If the business owner is suffering personally, typically they have to borrow from the business. If the business is suffering, typically they'll find that they're lending to the business on a personal side. So it's important to have integrated planning between those two silos. And what does that mean, right? Personal planning is, your own personal retirement plan, your personal risk management, like having savings for your personal needs. The business can be making sure that the business has enough in its operating account to handle payroll, parts, vendors, everything in between, but also having planning for that. What is the future value of the business going to be? What is the future, vision for this business? Are we going to have more locations or less, or what is sort of the roadmap there? And having a financial plan to get you there. What's often misinterpreted is that there are different types. So for me, I'm a financial advisor and a financial planner, and there are different types in the industry. So there are some that focus solely on investments, some that focus solely on personal planning, some that focus on business, some that focus on both. And there's planners like myself that sort of look at the global picture to say, okay, here's the snapshot of your world. Let's look at everything collectively and think through a broad plan for you moving forward. So understand that there's different types of, just like there's different types of attorneys that specialize in different types of techniques and strategies. The same applies to financial advisors. The same applies to CPAs and bankers. There can be specialties there. So realize that for those of you that are business owners, having either one person or several people helping you with all the different compartments of your business, and part of that eventually lends itself to employee benefits, which can be, a key piece of the business, which I'll get into a little bit more. But on that tech shortage I think there's no need to overexpress it. We have a tech shortage. It's very hard to get technicians into the industry. And it's interesting because I was reading an article recently that, over 50% of the American workforce today is a millennial. After the Great Resignation, with COVID, many people opted into retirement plans, severance packages, or a lot of families reevaluated what their financial needs were going to be moving forward, particularly those with young families. So the marketplace in general is now predominantly millennial, which means that the things that we're doing to attract people into our collision shops needs to change, because frankly, there are other jobs out there that they can, work from home, have flex time, work on their laptop and have good compensation with benefits. So in order to stay competitive with that, we're going to need to rethink the wheel and offer different things there. One concept that I find is often overlooked, and this is particular for business owners that have more than one person, or have a silent partner, or have owner operators that have different percentages. There's what's referred to as an operating agreement. So this goes back to that earlier slide of you need to have the attorney, the CPA, the financial advisor, and the banker. Very rarely when we meet with collision shop owners that have more than one partner, do they have an operating agreement or a buy-sell component. Let's face it, most shops that have more than one owner, it's typically, a body tech and a painter that were like, we've got this, let's open our own shop. And they go into business, and there's so much that goes into starting a shop from the ground up or buying an existing business that oftentimes things like this is overlooked. So an operating agreement is an agreement between both partners that stipulates their partnership, their stock arrangement, however they're organized. And it, in essence, talks through the what ifs of that partnership. If they decide to sell the business, if they decide that one wants out of the business, it sometimes will put a value to the business, but more often than not, I see that the buy-sell component of an operating agreement is left off the table and not discussed. And a buy-sell agreement basically talks about what happens if one of the owners becomes disabled, or what happens if one of them passes away. In many areas, if both business owners are married and something happens to one of the partners, the spouse of the deceased takes over that percentage of the business. So hopefully you like your partner's spouse because you're going to be in business with them. So these operating agreements typically are a part legal document that allows you to stipulate all the what ifs. And typically attorneys that specialize in that will ask all the questions, and they kind of walk you through what that process looks like. But then your financial advisor can also help you implement, disability policies and life insurance policies and all sorts of things to sort of capitalize that so that if anything were to happen, you're protected, and you're not left with an estate or probate issue or legal issues to try and fight for what's, yours. So that's something that often we see overlooked. I would say on the majority, most collision shop owners don't have one of these, or have never heard of it, or are not as covered as they think they are. Oftentimes, some of the shops we meet with that say, "Oh yeah, I have the buy-sell agreement." Either they just bought a life insurance policy and there's no legal contract, or they have the legal contract but they don't have any policies and it's not complete. So that's worth taking a look at. The next thing, retaining people. To my earlier point about how many millennials we have in the industry, what we have done up until this point isn't really going to work moving forward. With OEM certifications and having those at the tech and the shop level, with the complexity of repairs and what's really needed to do this, we need to attract people that are passionate to the industry and offer things that entice them to stay, particularly with what other jobs are out in the marketplace. So I think there are certainly areas that we can look at, whether it's, offering group health insurance, which can be very costly, offering retirement benefits for your people, offering a sign-on bonus, offering retention plans or education plans. I think more often than not, employees want to know what their future is going to look like. They want to know that they're taken care of. And it's important for us as employers to offer things and create that path. So thankfully, with like training programs and things like that, it can give sort of a roadmap for our technicians and our managers. But there are some other things that you can do to make sure that you've got your good people staying with you for the long haul. Businesses have different seasons of life. There's, some shops that are in that startup phase where they're just trying to keep the business afloat. There's some shops that are in that growth mode where they're trying to just replicate and add more locations. Some shops that are happy with where they're at in terms of growth, but they just want to sustain what they have. And in all of those cases, retaining your employees is part of that success factor. So beyond what's referred to as just general benefits to employees, there are some special things that you can do to particular, employees that are special. So key person planning is often what it's called, but you can create carve-out plans for managers, estimators, people that are really critical to the operation, and have some sort of a golden handcuff plan to retain and attract the people that are the most important to your business. And this will allow you to continue to grow your business, knowing that you're not going to lose your best employee for $1 more at another shop. If you have a consolidator come in and park next to you, you're going to be okay if you're competitive and you're offering all these things. So it's important to look through those things. And there's a variety of things that can work here. Perhaps it's looking at the hours that you have your technicians work. Maybe it's giving more flexible vacation time. Maybe it's offering, healthcare or group life insurance or group disability or a retirement plan, or maybe it's some of these key person plans. There's different avenues that shops can take depending on what they think and value the most and what their employees will value the most. So it's important to have some sort of component in place to retain the people that are most important to you. And this gives you sort of a glimpse of those different phases of business. So for a startup business, someone who's just opened the doors to their shop, more often than not, the money's just going back into the business, right? Most of that capital is just going back into new equipment, upgrading equipment, training, education, perhaps a low tier of benefits. Exit planning is probably not top of mind, but it's important to build with the end in mind. As you're growing your business, though, if you're looking to expand, grow sales, or grow into new locations, that's really where offering different retirement plans, benefit plans, that's going to appeal and attract to the younger millennial that's looking to get into your shop. And some of you might be thinking, yeah, but that's so expensive. There are different ways and different types of strategies to go to market with these things. There are different offerings that you can do that can be customized depending on the size of your shop, how many technicians you have. There's different things that you can do to be a little bit creative here. Some benefits are really, really affordable. Some are not. But something might be the feather in your cap that differentiates you from someone else. We recently talked with a shop, and one of the technicians, their wife has diabetes, and it's important to them to have health insurance, like very important, to the point that it's become a sticking point with the business. All because the technician's spouse has diabetes and they need medicine at an affordable rate. So like understanding what your employees need and what their lives look like beyond the 8 to 5 or whatever their hours are at your shop can help you determine what benefit's going to be of the most value. So really, the best advice I could give there is to talk to your people first and see what they would actually enjoy and what they would find rewarding. Because in some cases, maybe all of your technicians have spouses that have state-funded healthcare, or they have benefits that they can get through their spouse that are awesome and they don't need it. So there's no need for you to put money in that bucket. But there may be cases where you have some employees that would really value that, and it would make them, stay with you for their career if they had that sort of offering. So it's important to understand what phase of the business you're in, what's appropriate given the phase that you're in. Because certainly, if you're in startup mode, cash flow might be a little bit tighter than it's going to be when you're a mature business that's established, sustaining profitability. So understanding what your budget is, understanding what your employees would actually value, and that comes from communication. You just have to ask the questions to figure out what they really want. And then doing what you say you're going to do. If you say you're going to offer something that's going to attract and retain your employees. But really, financial planning is mostly about just having an integrated approach. And it, again, back to the whole piece of having all of your advising components, right? Whether those are people or companies or systems or whatever they may be, how can you get all the people that are helping your business together to help you create a plan that helps you succeed in business? Because as the business continues to get more complex and the estimating and parts and every other component in the business, it's important that you guys have a financial awareness of where your business is going. And again, I don't think I need to preach that, because I'm sure Kristen and Larry and everyone else this week has talked about every other component of the business. It's just complex. This industry is so dynamic and there's so many moving parts, and it's certainly not going to get easier. So for you to be on top of it all, having a plan, having people to help you with this plan, to help you get your business to where you want it to go. Unfortunately, it's sort of like whack-a-mole. You fix one thing and then something else pops up. But, looking at from your business standpoint, what are the things that could get in the way of your success? What are the things that could get in the way of you exiting your business? What are your possible exit strategies? What is the business truly worth? Do you have a buy sell? What is the effect if someone in the company either passes away, becomes sick, leaves? What if your partner wants to leave? What if your partner is a different age than you are and you have totally different ideals on when to sell the business? The other part of it is wealth distribution, and that can be a whole other topic as it relates to estate planning. But oftentimes we see collision centers where one child is heavily involved in the business and their other children are not, but a majority of the net worth of the family is tied up in the collision center. So when it comes to wealth distribution toward the end of life or toward retirement, what often becomes a sticky point is chances are the child that's worked through the business has earned their weight in taking over the business. So there's a sense of obligation to give the business to that one child, but is it unfair to the other children who have no interest in the business or have not put in as much work as the others? So wealth distribution can be a very tricky component, particularly when multiple marriages are involved, or kids from different marriages, or kids that are in or out of the business in some capacity. So having conversations about these things in advance of the 11th hour makes for a much smoother transition in either direction. Oftentimes, the phone calls I'll get are in the 11th hour, which you do the best you can. But if you plan ahead for some of these things and have conversations with your attorney, your accountant, your CPA about, hey, if I were to sell my business in 10 years, are there things that we should be changing in the taxes? Are there things that we should be changing in terms of deductions and showing on the balance sheet? Like, what should we be doing with this in mind? If you think you may want to sell the business to your children, having that conversation with your attorney. Do you want your child to go to the bank and finance it outright, or do you want to hold the note? And at what interest rate? So these are the types of things and questions to be asking these key advisors in your life, because they're going to have, chances are, some advice that they can give you. And some clarity around what's possible in these arenas. So thinking through as a whole, all these components and having all the advisors in your world collectively working together, best case would be to get them all four in a room and talk about, here's the roadmap of what I'd like to see happen over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, depending on how young you are and where you are at the business. But even for technicians out there, right, that some of these things also apply. Have someone do your taxes, have someone do your retirement planning. These are all things that I know they're not number one on anyone's to-do list, but they're important. And the phrase, "I wish I had done this sooner," is something that's said all too often as it relates to financial planning, accounting, legal, like all these things are things that it's better just to start the conversation. It doesn't mean you need to do anything, but start the conversation now. And then the last thing, industry-wide, I really have seen so much go on around consolidation, selling the business. It seems to be more and more popular. People are really, really curious about, well, how much is my business worth? Should I sell it? There's a lot of things that go into putting a value on your business. And sometimes the value of the business depends on who the buyer is. If it's a third-party private equity, it might be one value. If it's a third-party private equity first time getting into the market, they may pay more to get into that market if it's desirable to them. Or I've seen it where a business that's beautiful on paper, has a beautiful, facility, technicians, it's, on paper, it looks perfect, but it's in the middle of nowhere. And there's no one that wants it in the middle of nowhere. So understanding what challenges you may face in your exit are important. Understanding, what your need is. Oftentimes you may get that value from whomever the purchaser may be, but understanding what it is that you truly need to live off of in retirement is critical to a seamless transition. Oftentimes there are so many expenses that the business pays for on behalf of the owner. And there's write-offs that are allowed as being an owner, right? So oftentimes the company car, the cell phone, maybe trips or different pet projects are run through the business as a deduction. That can be really challenging when it comes back to thinking about, okay, if you sell the business tomorrow, all those deductions go away, and the person, the business who's been paying for that goes away, which means that you as a retiree are now living off of a fixed income and are going to need to rebudget those things. So having clarity around cash flow, both personally and in the business, can be critical. Understanding your estate planning. The estate tax code will sunset in 2025. And that's a fancy way of saying that the estate rules are going to change. So in 2026, the landscape that we know it will look a little different. So what that means, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but it's certainly important for anyone with a higher net worth. So if you've got, and let's face it, most collision shops have vehicles, they have property. More often than not, we see a lot of real estate, which means that your net worth can be over estate thresholds, which means that in order to transfer your wealth on to your children, there may be estate taxes due. So figuring that out or having a strategy around estate planning can be critical. No one screams that they want to sell their business. Typically it's whispered because no one wants, their technicians to walk out. So how are you going to keep your employees engaged all the way through the sale? Family dynamics can be, pretty critical, but also taxation. If you get a purchase price of $1 million, safe to assume that maybe close to 50% might be taken up in taxes. So are there strategies that you can deploy to either mitigate the taxes or is that value going to be enough? So thinking through what are your taxable implications of any decision either way. So really, across the board, I think the industry is shifting a little bit. Beyond technology and paint codes and everything else. I know that that's dynamic in its own right. But as business owners think through the future of their business, having some attention to their finances, having attention to what is their estate needs, what is the tax implications of selling this business, what is this really going to look like for me in 5-10 years? Those are things that I encourage all of you to start thinking about, asking questions around, reading. If you're looking for good book recommendations, you can always hit me up. I've always got a good one. But thinking through these things and having clarity around it, I think could be really, really helpful and critical to the business. So that's sort of what I had prepared for us. It's just sort of trends and things that I'm seeing across the board. Lots of consolidation, lots of challenges around retaining technicians, but also challenges around finding technicians. I think at least once or twice a week, I get asked, do you know a painter? Do you know a body man? Do you know an estimator? I don't foresee that changing. It's going to require some ingenuity and some changes in how we're going to market in order to attract those types of people into our businesses.
Wow, that's an awful lot to think about. You mentioned that a lot of people contact you at the 11th hour. You mentioned. When should I start this work? How do I determine when I should start this work? What should I be thinking about in regards to that?
I think right away, like there is no better time than now to at least have, it doesn't mean you have to do anything, but have a conversation. Oftentimes these conversations are complimentary. It's not something where you're even charged to get the question, but have conversations with your CPA, with your attorneys. We just recently had a couple months ago, someone who had signed the NDA, signed the agreement, like literally the money was on the way over to them. And they realized, oh, this might be taxed. Where should I put this? What should I do with this money? And we had 24 hours, so it was a very last minute thing. So that is too short of a window. We need more time than that. Oftentimes though, it's an afterthought. There's so much worry and concern around what is my business worth? Can I find a buyer? There's so many other things thought of beyond the after part, but it's important to have that in motion beforehand, because how you accept that money will affect its taxation and affect how you can distribute the money forward. Oftentimes people think that the accumulation phase of life is the hardest, but it's really the descent, right? Like the distribution phase that's the most challenging, because if you think of it, in your working years, you're putting money into your business, you're putting money into your retirement accounts, you're always funding these accounts. But at the peak of your life, before you go into retirement, you're always adding to the bucket. As you get into retirement, there's no more money going in, it's just coming out. So how are you going to depress that money forward? What if the market's down for 10 years straight into return? Not that it would be, but what is the effects of taking money out of these accounts, wherever you may put them, moving forward? So the sooner you can start talking about these things, it might even be 20 years out and you could have the conversation. But beyond that, even with your CPA, it takes a while to plan for those things, to have, most valuations are done based on last 3 years of taxes, your balance sheet, and your P&L. So talking with your CPA about should the business be paying for the boat? Things through that, those are the things that maybe you want to think through with your CPA on what could maybe come off the business to make it look a little bit better on paper. So as soon as possible, Jason.
Yeah, as soon as possible. That's perfect. Yeah, it's a lot to think about, right? I mean, when you start your career and you start thinking about retirement right away, same thing here, right? What to do with your business, I think, and that proper planning certainly is going to be important, and lots and lots of things to think about. And especially with the world that we live in right now, with consolidation, with COVID, with part shortages, with just everything, right? Even vehicle technology, I think, probably plays a role to a certain extent. If I don't want to keep investing in additional tools and equipment at some point, I'm thinking about retiring. So there's obviously a lot to think about. Hey, before we let you go, we don't have any questions coming in, I don't believe, for you. But before we let you go, can you tell us a little about your Collision Hub 20 group and what it involves, and if there's any room available for anybody that wants to join that?
Yeah, no, there's absolutely room. So grateful to be a part of the C20 groups. It's really cool. I've met some really incredible people through it and made some new friendships. But the group is about creating different pieces of information. So every month we talk about a different subject. Again, I realize that my group's never going to be the coolest group. It's not the funnest stuff. The stuff we talk about is definitely 11th on everyone's checklist, but they're all intended to be topics that you should know and maybe haven't been exposed to. So, this year we did estate planning. So we had a whole session on estate planning and things to be, I'm blanking on the word. It's been a long day. Things to be mindful of. And then we had one on Social Security. We had one on investing in retirement. We've had case studies. We've had benefits. We've done different ones on key person planning, how to retain technicians, like actual, showing how these plans work and how you can build this. So we've done pay plans. We've talked about a lot of different subjects, and usually it's driven by the group. So the group has driven all sorts of different topics. But the purpose of the group is to educate shop owners on their finances and give a little bit of information, enough to be versed. I try to use analogies where I can to relay it back to the industry that we know. But it's intended to elevate all of us into financial awareness. And absolutely, there's always room.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a great group to be a part of, and we got Larry for the fun stuff up front, right, with his estimating program.
Mm-hmm.
But that's certainly running your business and being more effective on the financial side, and just all the stuff that you offer, I think is a huge benefit. So if you're interested in learning more about that, certainly reach out to us. Visit the Collision Hub website. You can purchase a subscription right from there. Or if you need to get in touch with Rachel, maybe you got a couple of questions about it, certainly drop us a line. We'd be more than happy to put you in touch with her and get those conversations going as well. Anything else to add this evening, Rachel?
Start now. Start saving now. Put $1 in savings.
All right, awesome. Well, we thank you for your time as always. It's always a pleasure to work with you, and we look forward to seeing you soon. The World's Fair will be back one final time for our spring 2022 session here. So we'll be back in a little under an hour at 7 o'clock Central Time. Kristen, Larry, and I are going to wrap us up and talk about some welding and some of the pitfalls that we find ourselves in before we even strike that first arc. So tune into that and get some tips on things to start thinking about. Maybe you haven't in the past. So again, Rachel, thank you for your time, and everybody else, we will see you in about an hour.
Thank you.